And he's like, where are you going so early, little red cap? To grandmother's.
Where does your grandmother live? About a quarter of an hour from here in the forest. Her house is under the big oak trees. You can tell by the hazel bushes. I wrote, way to give him directions.
And I wrote, just draw a fucking map, lazy. She's like, oh, what white van is that? Oh, you have candy in there and puppies? Yeah. I'm in. All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of Cracking Spines Podcast. I am here with Candice, and we are going to be talking about the dangerous wolves and naive girls motif, aka Little Red Riding Hood. If you're new here, please tell everyone you know about this podcast. Rave about it. Tell them it's the most amazing thing you've ever heard. And if you don't do this, then that'll let us know that you're a horrible person and we don't like you.
Yeah.
You can check out our store at kit.co/Cracking Spines Podcast. That's kit.co/Cracking Spines Podcast. Here you can find all our reading materials, the books, the book lists, anything you could possibly need that we use ourselves and we stand by. This is a part of the episode where we talk about our amazing sponsors. Unfortunately, right now, we don't have any as we are a new podcast. If you would like to sponsor an episode, please email us at info@crackingspinespodcast.com. And as always,
listener discretion is advised. Major trigger warning today.
We will be talking about sexual assault. All right, first up, we have Mr. Charles Perrault. Basile's taking a nap this week. He's kind of a dick. We're just gonna
let's take a little time out on Basile.
Yeah, like he's a little not. There's a few screws that are loose.
Yes,
maybe.
I don't know if you timed it this way when you laid out the calendar for March, but I appreciate that week 3 we get a little bit of a break.
Yeah,
from
no
the
Basile for a minute. He's
rapey stiletto shoe stabbing.
I mean, he's very
aggressive.
Cishet male.
Okay, sure.
Rapey. All right, let's get into it. So we're going to be discussing Little Red Riding Hood by Charles Perrault, Little Red Cap by the Brothers Grimm, and Little Red Riding Hood by David McPhail. First up, Mr. Perrault.
All right.
This is pretty short.
Yeah, these stories are all very, very similar. There isn't a lot of
I'm already looking at my notes. What does that one say? Not all men.
Not all men.
Not all men.
There's a little bit more nuance in the differences. I think the differences are really in the ending of all 3 of these books, but
yes.
we'll get into the meat of the story.
She's a little bit sociopathic at times.
Yeah.
Little misread.
Yeah, how the story wraps up is what changes, I think.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Okay, so once upon a time, we have a little girl who is headed off to see her grandmother.
First and foremost, let's just start off with Perrault's obsession with things being... Perrault, as a fairy tale writer, he's very hyperbolic.
Yes.
So you have him saying, once upon a time, there was a little village girl, the prettiest that had ever been seen.
Right.
Homie, that's subjective.
Right.
Let's work in objective. Anyway.
There's never a middle gray when it comes to
her mother's alive. That's fun.
Yeah.
The mother stays alive in these ones.
Yes. So one day her mother baked some biscuits and said to her, go see your grandmother, who's been feeling a little sick. So that's how a lot of these stories start. She heads off to visit grandmother with some level of baked good or
biscuits and butter.
Biscuits and butter.
Biscuits and butter, baby.
A pot of butter.
A pot of butter.
Not just a stick of butter.
Not a stick. No.
A pot of butter.
It's like butter.
So Little Red departs to go visit her grandmother, who lives in another village. And in doing so, she passes through the forest where she meets an old neighbor wolf who has a great desire to eat her. He has not dared to in the past because of woodcutters in the forest.
Yeah, been there. So here's my thing. Like, are villages in this sense like neighborhoods?
Yes.
Okay.
So he asks where she is going.
And the poor child. This is how first she's the prettiest. Now she's a poor child. Like, there's not a lot going on. The light bulbs are flickering. Mm-hmm. There's like a menacing flicker behind those eyes.
Right.
And when I say menacing, I mean like her own brain is working against her apparently here.
Because she did not know that it is dangerous to stop and listen to a wolf.
She didn't know a wolf was dangerous, but she's like, hey, I'm going to go like give this bread and this pot of butter to my grandmother.
Does she live far? The wolf asks.
And she's like, oh, yeah. You just got to go by the mill, which you can see right over there. And then hers is the house in the village. First house.
I wrote, way to give him directions.
And I wrote, just draw a fucking map, lazy. Fuck. Stupid idiot. She's like, oh, what white van is that? Oh, you have candy in there and puppies? Yeah. I'm in.
Yeah. The wolf says, I'll go and see her too. You take that path over there and I'll take this one and we'll see who gets there first.
He's like, let's race.
Yeah.
And she's like, ooh, a game.
Yep. So the wolf runs as fast as he can and clearly makes it there first. So he knocks on the door. Grandma says, "Who is it?"
Well, first of all, let's just explain. He's like, TikTok, and he's like, all my followers want to know what I'm doing at Grandma's house, and we're about to eat this bitch.
What?
Like for part 2. Hit that plus sign.
She says, "Who's there?" And he pretends to be Little Red Riding Hood. He disguises his voice and says, "It's your granddaughter. I've brought you some biscuits and a pot of butter." Because, Little Red told him everything.
That's by the way, the cure for everything, bread and butter. Mm-hmm. Why do you think that everyone's like always like, "You're gonna be skinny, don't eat bread"? It's because they want you to get sick.
So grandmother says, "Go ahead and pull the bobbin. The latch will fall." So the wolf comes in, pounces on her, and devours grandma quicker than a wink.
Okay, so I am gonna just actually step out on a limb here.
Okay.
I am actually starting to think about the eating portion of I think that has to do more with trigger warning. I think this is about rape. Fuck. See, I thought we were gonna get away from that theme. Last night I read this sped read it because I've already read it before.
I didn't get to the rape part, but I did get to
I was getting stranger danger.
Sickness and death. That's where I went with it.
Oh.
He devours grandma. He takes the little girl, old, young, it doesn't matter.
I was looking at stranger danger.
Well, stranger danger for sure.
Yeah, I feel like this is a scary little girl. Little boys are screwed in this era of life where they're like, "Hey, everyone's just going to give you everything that you want and you don't have to worry about anything."
Yeah.
They're like, "Okay."
Y'all listen with us and see which direction you go in. So grandma's been devoured. And after that, he lays down in grandma's bed to wait for Little Red Riding Hood to come along. So she knocks on the door. Who's there?
Biscuits and butter.
When she heard the gruff voice of the wolf, Little Red was scared, but she thought her grandma had a cold. So,
yes.
Makes sense. So she responds, "It's your granddaughter. I've brought you some biscuits and butter." And the wolf said, "Pull the bobbin, the latch will fall." Little Red comes in. Upon seeing her, the wolf hid under the bed covers and said, "Put the biscuits and come down and lay down beside me."
How did I not catch that last night? Because literally, I mean, I was there. I was just looking at the more initial danger that a youngster would be put in. Because Little Red Riding Hood undressed and went to get into bed, where she was quite astonished to see that her grandmother was dressed in her nightgown. And she said to her, "What big arms you have, grandmother." Okay, first of all, she's like, "I'm gonna get naked and jump in bed with my grandmother who isn't naked," which is weird. The fact that grandma's not naked is weird. And this is where I said, good thing the wolf didn't have, first of all, I spelled wolf, WOLVE, because
the wolf?
Wolva. Wolva. So good thing the wolf didn't drive a candy van.
Yeah.
Jesus. And she's like,
this was insanely easy.
Yeah, okay, I'll just get naked and jump. He didn't even ask her to take the clothes off.
Big furry wolf.
She's like, "I'm just gonna take my clothes off."
Yeah. The naivety, right?
And then the classic: better to hug you with, what big eyes you have, or legs you have, better to run with, what big teeth you have, better to eat you with.
Right. Upon saying these words, the wolf pounced on Little Red and ate her up. The end.
Yeah, here's the moral of the story. Let's get into this. The moral goes, one sees here that young children, especially pretty girls, polite, well-taught, and pure as pearls, should stay on guard against all sorts of men. That's where I wrote, not all men. For if one fails to stay alert, it won't be strange to see one eaten by a wolf enraged. I say a wolf since not all types are wild, or can be said to be the same in kind. Some are winning and have sharp minds. Some are loud or smooth or mild. Others appear just kind and unriled. They follow young ladies wherever they go, right into the halls of their very own homes. Alas for those who refuse the truth. Sweetest tongue has the sharpest tooth. So where it says they follow young ladies wherever they go, right into the halls of their very own homes, I wrote, they will rape you.
Yeah.
Fun fact. Here's a little story I can give to you guys. I was snatched out of a parking lot when I was 14 by somebody.
Really?
And I fought my way out of the truck. And luckily, they drove away from that shopping center and into the south side of my neighborhood. Actually, I have a scar on my hand right here from breaking his nose open. And when the cartilage was sticking out, I punched him one more time. I was able to get out of the car.
Wow.
But yeah, I fell for the old oh, where are we going? I'm like, oh, I know my way around here. And I was like, cool guy.
Yeah.
Scary. Very scary.
Yeah. The child abducting, winning the trust of the small child. The moral calling out, especially pretty girls, is where it gets. Because when I was reading these last night,
it's sexualizing children big time.
The on the nose is obviously stranger danger.
Yeah.
Right. The naivety of little girls and the danger of this world if they're not aware of how vulnerable they are.
Yes. And they also speak of the wolf was going after, it didn't matter who it was.
Right.
Grandmother, she was vulnerable because she was sick. He went after her.
Which is why I
Little
thought,
Red, vulnerable, went after her.
which is why I thought maybe symbolic of death or illness, especially the times that these were written in.
Illness makes a lot of sense too, because like one of my thoughts of, other than just like, why did you expect your grandmother to be naked when you got naked and jumped in the bed, was you're getting into the bed with someone that's thought to be sick.
Right.
Like, I'm pretty sure you guys knew it was communicable back then. Like the Black Death had already came.
Right.
The plague had already gone.
But unlike Hansel and Gretel
She's
or
probably
any
Republican, didn't believe in it.
probably. Yeah, no vaccines in this house.
Yeah.
But it's gendered. That's where my whole like it's death, it's illness. Yeah, but it's gendered. It's especially pretty little
it's
girls.
women. It's not like a grandfather that's sick and weak and whatever. It's
right.
Because that would make the wolf more like in the sense of when in the context of which this was written, at the time that this was written, the way men were viewed by society as being strong and tough, and that's what their job was. And if you were like like I'm gonna bring up Once Upon a Time, ABC's Once Upon a Time. Look at who Mr. Gold, aka Rumpelstiltskin, was before he became the Dark One. He was cowardly and everybody like spat on him for it. Like that's
weak and
that's the kind of vibe that is being, which that's a great time to take a step in here. Don't forget, next week we're going to be speaking about the fate of spinning. Get ready for that, because that has to do with like the Rumpelstiltskin stories.
Right.
Back to the subject at hand.
But the moral, again, going back to that gendered thing,
They follow young ladies.
They follow young ladies. Some are loud or smooth or mild. Others appear kind, and it's a very men and women moral.
It's saying be careful of men.
It's a gendered moral.
Yeah, it's be careful of men.
Right.
And that's why Basile hasn't said anything, because he's like, women, those objects.
Yeah. This is interesting. We're having like
this is not shit we thought it like okay, you guys don't understand, like this
is why we don't talk about it beforehand, because
our brains read these independently, completely different, and like somehow when our brains come together on it, that's where the missing link was.
Yeah.
Like but like she's one side of the brain, on the other side of the brain, and then like finally when you put the two sides together, they work as a full function.
Well, now I'm excited to talk about the Brothers Grimm and Little Redcap, now that we've got this whole death, sickness versus sexual assault
situation going
on.
Because I want to know, like, that's actually, you know what? So while I'm writing something down, because you guys don't hear the gaps in this, while I'm writing something down, Candice said, fuck, how do we always end up at rape? And one of the things I constantly push when it comes to this idea of folk and fairy tales is how the adaptations change to fit social constructs.
Yeah.
It really highlights, or exemplifies might be the word, I don't know. It really highlights how women throughout time have been viewed in society.
Yeah.
And as you move away from Basile, which is like the older of the stories, and move more towards Grimm, which is the younger of the stories, McPhail for in this case, you start to see women be less of objects and become more human. Mm-hmm. Which is why I think Basile may have left this one alone, because what the fuck does he care? Like
right.
he objectifies women throughout all of his shit.
Right.
And as you looked at Disney, when Disney took on all these, it was women relied on men to survive via financially through marriage. And that's why it was always a Prince Charming had to come save her. And as you get into the more recent things like Mulan and Brave and Frozen, it's more about women empowerment, and
right.
like, because that's where we've come throughout this timeline of how women are treated. I think folk and fairy tales is a great way to examine like the history of the treatment of women throughout time.
Right.
I think it's
a lot of things. I mean, we talked about a couple episodes ago with The Fruitful Sleep, the evolution of not only men as providers, but family dynamics.
Yeah. Very that.
There's a lot of domestic relationship evolution in all these stories. I love how this episode is evolving as we're doing it.
Yeah.
But to your point about these stories highlighting how women were treated, I think it's kind of fun as you guys, as the listener, following Jon and I, as we, in the midst of this first Perrault story, identified a couple of things. Is this sickness? Is this death? Is this rape? Is it both? And also, how does that pertain to Little Red? And keeping that in mind with us as we now go into the Brothers Grimm.
Yes. So the Brothers Grimm. Once upon a time, there's a sweet little maiden. Whoever laid eyes upon her could not help but love her. Here again, we see another mention of it's the beautiful ones. It's the beautiful ones. Her grandmother, who loved her most, could never give the child enough. One time, she made her a present, a small red velvet cap, and since it was so becoming, the maiden insisted on always wearing it, and from there forward, she was called Little Redcap. That's the title of the Grimm's version.
Right. Once again, Mom is the one that gets this story She's the impetus of the story by saying, take this piece of cake and bottle of wine and bring them to your grandmother. She's sick and weak, and this will strengthen her.
Get her drunk. But also, I want to point out here, so Basile always gets rid of the parents or gets rid of the mom, and he treats women like objects, right? In every one of Basile's stories we've read so far, like, mom's out. Remember, like, dad left. It was just dad. Mom was gone. I think she died during childbirth or something. I don't remember exactly how that was in the fruitful sleep, but I wonder if that's why. I'm pretty sure this wasn't written yet. This storyline hadn't been developed during Basile's time.
Yeah, it says that Perrault's source has never been clearly identified because it may be an oral tradition, but Perrault is the first.
Yeah, Perrault is the first.
So mom specifically says, do not stray from the path. I mean, mom's basically like, get out there, go before it's hot. She's giving her the rules.
Get an early start before it becomes hot.
Be nice and good and don't stray from the path. Otherwise, you'll fall and break the glass and your grandmother will get nothing. And when you enter the room, don't forget to say good morning and don't go peeping into all the corners.
Oh, which is amazing. It's amazing. It's amazing. It's amazing. It's amazing. There's a parallel. If anybody has ever, not parallel, but this is truly tied in. And I just realized this now. That show Grimm that I love. Okay, it's kind of cheesy, but like the storyline is actually pretty good. The first episode is a Little Red Riding Hood episode, and there's a part where they're like, "Oh, why don't we check the park?" And Nick is like, "No, mom specifically said she's supposed to go around this to get to her grandfather's house, after school." And his partner Hank's like, "Yeah, but how often do kids actually listen to their mom? If I was her, I would have cut straight through this park. It's way faster."
Right.
And right here, well, the grandmother lived out in the forest, half an hour from the village. And as soon as Little Redcap entered the forest, she encountered a wolf. However, Little Redcap did not know what a wicked sort of animal he was and was not afraid of him. "Good day, Little Redcap," he said. She said, "Thank you, kindly wolf." Here again, this is her not being able to, she's naive. She doesn't know the difference between a bad man and a good man.
Right. Specifically the line, she was not afraid of him.
She's not afraid at all. And he's like, "Where are you going so early, Little Redcap?" "To grandmother's."
"Where does your grandmother live?" "About a quarter of an hour from here in the forest. Her house is under the big oak trees. You can tell by the hazel bushes." Again, drawing a map.
Yeah, again, just draw the map. And then the wolf thought to himself, "This tender young thing is a juicy morsel.
She'll taste even better
than the old woman."
You've got to be real crafty if you want to.
You gotta be fucking kidding me is what you gotta be.
You gotta be real crafty if you want to catch them both. That's the next line. Okay.
Okay, let's get into it.
Okay, so here's where the Brothers Grimm take a little bit of a detour with the story from Perrault, which is
a little bit of creative freedom.
Yeah, a little creative freedom here in that basically the wolf needs to distract her so that he can have enough time to get to grandma's house, eat her. And, so instead of let's have a race, he's like, "Don't you want to go pick some flowers?"
Yeah.
And encourages her to go pick fresh flowers that grandma certainly will like. And so she runs off down the path and plunges into the woods to look for flowers. And each time she plucked one, she thought she saw another one even prettier. So he's basically given her busy work while he,
getting deeper and deeper,
meanwhile, follows her very detailed instructions to grandma's house.
I legit wrote here, your mom said, "Don't do that."
Yeah.
I was yelling at her at this point, like, "You stupid little asshole, you little brat, listen to your mom."
Both stories start with mom specifically saying, don't do this.
And she's like, "Bet, hold my beer."
Yeah. So the wolf obviously utilizes this time and goes straight to grandma's house, knocks on the door. And when he comes in, he lifts the latch, goes straight to grandmother's bed without saying a word, and gobbles her up. Yep.
Then he puts her clothes on and her nightcap, lay down in the bed, and made the room nice and dark.
Right. Meanwhile, Little Redcap comes running along. She was puzzled when she found the door open. I thought that was kind of interesting because we're really painting with a thick brush the naivety of this child. Yeah. The door's open.
Yeah.
It's dark inside.
And in pure white person fashion, she's like, "I must investigate."
Yes. So she enters the room. It seems so strange. And she thought, "Oh my God, how frightened I feel today. And I usually like it at grandma's house."
Yeah. And then she's like, "Good morning." And like,
that's your intuition, sweetheart.
Yeah.
That is your intuition. Listen to that voice.
Yeah. It's gut feeling is a gut feeling for a reason. Or in tarot reading, that's your hermit card.
Yeah.
So it goes on to no answer. She assumes, oh, she's not feeling well.
Yeah. She drew back the curtains, and there lay her grandmother with her cap pulled down over her face, giving her a strange appearance.
"Oh, grandmother, what big ears you have, the better to hear you with. Oh, grandmother, what big hands you have, the better to grab you with. Oh, grandmother, what a terribly big mouth you have,
the better to eat you with." No sooner did the wolf say that he jumped out of bed and gobbled her up.
Gobbled her.
Yeah.
Nummies, right?
So then, now that he has done that, he begins to snore very loudly, like full on food coma.
Yeah, just
out for the count.
It's that, you know what it is? What is it? What's found in turkeys?
Tryptophan?
Tryptophan, yeah. He ate 2 turkeys and ended up with tryptophan. Anyway.
All right, so the tryptophan has him on his ass.
Yeah, and...
The huntsman is passing by.
Hold on.
Okay.
Chris Hemsworth is passing by.
Okay.
That's
a different huntsman. That's from Snow White.
Like they don't recycle a prince. So the huntsman comes along and he's like, hey, wait a minute. The way the old woman's snoring is just... Old women don't snore like that. Which is sexist because I've heard some women snore.
I should see if something's wrong. So he goes in and...
What an excuse.
He sees the wolf lying there and says, so I have found you at last, you old sinner. I've been looking for you for a long time. So,
and he had a gun. He was ready to blast a cap in that ass.
Aims it right at the wolf.
But then he realizes, hey, you know what? They might still be alive in there.
Because that makes sense.
Yeah, like they can hold their breath for 20 minutes, apparently.
Right.
Anyhow.
And he swallowed him in one bite.
Yeah, one whole bite. Like, how big is this wolf? Okay. Hey, guys, I'm just going to cut in here real quick. This is not editing, John, because Candice is editing this. So this is where I pop in. We make a lot... let's be honest, it's me. I make a lot of inappropriate jokes when we film these. And so we're considering starting a Patreon. It'll have a flat rate and we'll be posting just compilations of our outtakes. It's basically cracking
bloopers.
spines with no context.
Yeah. If you thought listener discretion was advised for the episodes, it's doubly advised for
I should literally
the
be
Patreon.
walking around with a yellow shirt on that says caution, trigger warning.
I feel like we need to card people as they enter the Patreon.
Yeah, you have to be at least 30. Like we need some life experience there where you understand how people cope with trauma. Yeah. Okay, back to us in the studio. Cut that.
Okay, so
anyway.
So he doesn't shoot. Instead, he takes out scissors and starts cutting open the wolf. Again, thinking grandma and the little girl. Like, I don't know who's in there, but they might be alive.
Yeah, and like, by the way, the wolf is still alive, not waking up. No general anesthesia. No,
just
local anesthetic.
One hell of a food coma.
He's just, I'm cutting him open. I'm cutting him open. Gets him out, and then she was alive but could hardly breathe.
Grandma was.
Yeah.
Little Red pops right out and was like, oh, how frightening that was. It was so dark in there.
No, not even that. Like, yeah, I mean, she got out, but she was just like, hold on, I'm going to go get some large rocks real quick.
Right. So they fill his belly with large stones, filled his body completely with them.
And like sewed him back up. And I was like, I wrote, feels unnecessary.
Yeah. You got a gun.
Yeah,
and you've also cut him in half.
Yeah, this is very much like this is the equivalent
Torture.
of them. No, this is the equivalent of tying his shoelaces together.
Yeah, because when he wakes up, he tries to run away. The stones are too heavy, and he fell down at once and died.
Like, what was the point?
All three were delighted. The huntsman
psychopaths.
The huntsman skinned the fur from the wolf and went home with it. Grandma ate the cake, drank the wine,
got trashed.
Regained her health. Meanwhile, Little Redcap thought to herself, never again will you stray from the path by yourself and go into the forest when your mother has forbidden it.
Oh, now?
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Granny's drunk. Like, did I ever say
I got swallowed by a wolf once.
That's a long time ago. That's a wolf.
Okay.
Yeah. There is another tale about how Little Redcap returned to her grandmother. One day to bring some baked goods, another wolf spoke to her and tried to entice her to leave the path, but this time Little Redcap was on her guard. So this is like there's an alternate story to this where
by the Grimm brothers, right?
By the Grimm brothers, yeah.
Right.
Like
they wrote two versions.
One version is she gets tricked, all this shit happens, she comes out on top. The other version is much shorter. It's 2-3 paragraphs.
Mm-hmm.
And it's their way of saying, had you just listened to your mom, none of this would have happened. So basically,
she was on her guard.
She was on her guard.
The wolf came across the little girl, but she was on her guard and she was suspicious of him. So she went straight to her grandmother's house and told her that she'd seen a wolf.
Yes. And then like soon the wolf comes like, open up, Grandma. It's me. I came to bring you baked goods, but they kept quiet, did not open the door. So Greyhead, the name of the wolf, I guess, circled the house several times, finally jumped on the roof. He wanted to wait till evening when Little Redcap would go home. But grandmother realized what he had in mind. In front of the house was a big stone trough and sent Little Redcap out, took sausages yesterday, blah, blah, blah.
They basically trap him. They build a trap for him with sausages.
He falls off the roof, slips, falls right into the big troughs and drowns.
Right. But in that story, she specifically says, he would have eaten me if I hadn't been on the open road, like Mom told me to be.
Yeah. So I listen to Mom, and
two versions of the story telling the same moral, basically.
I don't get fucking like killed. Now we come to David McPhail.
Now we've switched over to folk and fairy tales. This is the first time this month that we're switching over to this book. Both are available in our store. Up until now, we've been primarily in the great fairy tale tradition, but the third story in our Dangerous Wolves motif is Little Red Riding Hood by David McPhail in Folk and Fairy Tales.
Very that. So, another one of Stone John's writings. Okay, so let's just get it. There's a little girl named Little Red Riding Hood. Because whenever she went out, she wore a pretty cape. This is removing the idea already that she's the prettiest ever and blah, blah, blah.
But again, Grandma's sick, could not leave her bed. So her mom sends her off and says, stay on the path and don't dawdle. So same mission, same instruction, all 3 stories.
I underline that, not because it's like the same mission, but because her mom said dawdle. And I just found that hilarious.
Useful. Halfway to Grandma's house when she meets a wolf. She didn't know what a bad sort of animal was, and she did not feel afraid. Again,
it's very that was grim.
Yeah, practically to the letter. She did not feel afraid.
Yes.
I feel like all 3 have said that.
Yeah.
So where are you off to so early? I'm taking cookies to my grandmother.
Here's the map.
Yeah. Her house stands beneath 3 oak trees. Just full, here's my plan, here's what I'm doing. So as she was innocently explaining.
Flowers.
Yes, as she was innocently explaining all this, the wolf thought, if I can get there before her, I can eat Grandma from a main course, and she can be my dessert.
So should we know what this means now?
Yeah.
I don't think... that we'll get into that.
Couldn't it have just been death?
Yeah.
Couldn't it have been the plague? Just once, could it have just been the plague?
Any of that? Because that would be...
All right, so flowers.
Right. Okay.
Your grandmother deserves some flowers. Don't you think she would love that? He set Little Red Riding Hood off on this plan to venture further and further off the path to pick flowers. And that's when he makes his way to Grandma's house super hastily. Knocks on the door. Who's there? It's your granddaughter. Please open the door.
Come in. Door is not locked. This is where my note comes in. As soon as the door opened, the grandmother realized, oh shit, I made a mistake. And I think this is really important because this is saying like even women of experience can sometimes be confused or can sometimes mistaken a bad person for a good one. Yeah, but it says, and then the grandmother realized her mistake, and I wrote, and it was in that moment she knew she fucked up.
Yeah, but that's interesting that you call out that line because it's the first time that Grandma's had that thought.
She's like, oh shit.
Whoops.
She's like, oh,
she
fuck.
recognizes danger, right?
And so she runs and like he steps into the room. She, was weak, but she ran into the wardrobe and locked the door.
Right. So now
she hid in the closet.
McPhail's really where we start to see some change in the story.
Well, I mean, this was published in 1995,
right.
So we're in the 20th century.
Right. So this is the beginning of like some big changes, which is Grandma, even in her sick and weakened state, bolts to the wardrobe and locks herself in, where she remains hiding as the wolf puts on her cap and her glasses, climbs into bed, and here comes Little Red Riding Hood.
Well, it's not even just that. Like he could have like ripped the door off its hinges, as it says, but he saw Little Red Riding Hood coming up the path through the window, and he's like, oh, shit.
Got to choose a plan.
It's showtime.
Got to choose a plan. So he...
Places, everybody. Places.
Yep, pulls the covers up to his chin. Little Red Riding Hood was surprised to see that the door was open, but nevertheless, she went inside.
Good morning, grandmother, she called, but there was no answer. Little Red Riding Hood stepped closer to the bed. As the curtain had been drawn around the bed, Little Red Riding Hood could not see clearly in the dim light. Oh, grandmother, she explained, what big ears you have. So on and so forth, all better to eat you with. But Little Red Riding Hood was too quick for the wolf. Before he could catch her, she dove for under the bed. Right? He went after her, but he got stuck because, little too many. He's eating too many grandmas and babies.
Right.
Lately. He's a serial wolfist.
So just like her grandma, in the last moment, she realized she's in danger and was quick on her feet to
she's like, oh shit,
hightail it the hell out of there.
Yeah.
And then begins screaming at the top of her lungs, help, help, help. There's a big bad wolf in here. I fear he has eaten my grandmother.
Yeah, literally calling out, like, that's her rape whistle.
Yeah.
She's screaming on her rape.
And Grandma hears this and comes climbing out of the wardrobe. Meanwhile, everyone who happened to be in the forest that day, including a woodcutter with a sharp ass,
Well, hey, sharp ass axe.
Including a woodcutter with a mighty sharp axe.
Ran to help.
They
had nearly reached the college when the wolf finally managed to squeeze out from under the bed and stagger through the door. The last time Little Red Riding Hood saw the wolf, he was running down the path, followed closely by the hostile crowd. And Little Red Riding Hood never saw or heard from him again.
Yeah.
So,
talk about an evolution in character.
Well, also it's an evolution in character as well as this is somebody that's writing in 1995 they're keeping their children audience in mind for this. So
right.
there's no death in it. It's close calls. It's beware.
But also
something could have happened.
But what you should do.
Run,
hide, scream
for help.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
it's the same moral, it's the same warning, but with a little bit of instruction for children.
Yeah, so
which is why I naively return to like, oh, this is a stranger danger metaphor.
So when we're discussing this dangerous wolves and naive girl motifs, this is really more of a cautionary tale to young girls, in some versions, specifically the pretty ones, which every young lady should be told that they're pretty. They should always feel pretty. So that way they all obey the rules of these books. Like, I mean, everyone's pretty in their own way. But what I'm getting at is like, this is a cautionary tale to teach girls who by society over time are seen as defenseless, right? And especially to someone that's a predator.
Yeah.
That's good. That's a more appeasing target for them is because they're more defenseless.
You definitely
listen to your parents. Like,
listen to your parents and learn to turn that into an intuition. Listen to that voice in your head. Oh, the door's open.
Yeah, that's not good.
Like even when she had broken mom's rules, there were still moments in all three stories where that little voice in her head was like, "This is odd.
This doesn't feel right."
Right.
So yeah, I mean,
self-preservation needs to kick in at some point.
At some point. What was cool though to watch through this is how it became less and less and less about. There's no victim blaming in there. Well, if she didn't look like that, it wouldn't have happened.
Right.
Like if she wasn't wearing that, it wouldn't have happened. Like,
right.
It's less about that and more about the perversion of the wolf or the danger of the wolf. And as we go further and further forward into it's teaching how to recognize weird behaviors, things like that. As we move forward through the centuries from Perrault, which was 18th century, and then you go into Brothers Grimm, which is like 18th, 19th century, and then you move into McPhail, which is 20th century. You see a transition from it being like, oh, just these certain types have to worry about it, to it's not just a combination of what the victim is versus what the attacker is. It's more so this is what the attacker is.
Right. And the juxtaposition in all three books, young and old.
Yeah.
It wasn't Mom and Little Red. All three authors, all three stories are like, no, the littlest of maidens and the oldest and sickest of
the vulnerable.
Yes.
The most vulnerable.
Which look a lot of different ways. Which
because Mom,
wolf is the wolf, and the wolf is going after whoever he can get. And
Mom could probably handle that wolf with a pitchfork.
Right.
Because when she was screaming help, women and men came running in McPhail's version.
But I think you touch on something that's really, I focused on all the little reds, all the grandmothers, all those things, but the wolf is very consistently
always
the same kind of threat.
Yeah.
The same kind of danger.
Maniacal, conniving.
Same motivation.
Greedy. Like, obviously, now that we understand the underpin story here, sexually greedy.
Yeah.
Full deviant.
Yeah, that doesn't change over 200 years.
Doing anything they can to entrap all that they can because they're desperate for whatever they can get, and they're going to try to get what they can.
There's even a line in one of the books that he hadn't eaten for 4 days.
Yeah. So, oh God, that means who was the other victims?
But I mean, he does not change in his in his profile.
Oh, this makes me feel dirty. Fairy tales, like, this is what I think every literature major that's ever taken a myths and legends class, or this is where you normally would study your folk and fairy tales and things like that. Disney is not what these tales were about. Disney, I mean, yeah, it's a readaptation. So technically, by my own standards of viewing this kind of literature or these storylines, I should appreciate what Disney did because it was adapting it for that time and that frame. But what I hate about Disney isn't their adaptations of the story, because it really speaks more of as a timepiece. It's the fact that they copyrighted all the shit so that nobody else could do it without having to pay them a nice fancy chunk of money for something that wasn't even originally theirs in the first place, because capitalism. And
this is why we wanted to do this podcast. And I think that I did not see it coming that Little Red would be where I would have this conversation.
The epiphany moment.
But we've landed on sexual assault and rape. But you guys as listeners could be completely disagreeing with us right now and holding your own in thinking that it is death or sickness. Or you could get 3-4 people into a room and very
easily
easily argue
different.
what you think the wolf represents, what you think her vulnerability represents. And that's why these conversations are, don't read alone, read and talk to your friends, read and talk to other people.
Just in general with all books. But here's another thing, you know, like I really would, and probably give us a month or two. We're putting together a Patreon because we're going to try to use that to pay for the camera equipment needed for us to film these. You guys don't get to see each other, our facial expressions. The second I was like, oh shit, this is about rape and like a perverted human being that's not just like a child molester, but also like it's not even child molester, child rapist, and like an old lady, like rapes a vulnerable. When I said that, you could see it in Candice's face. She's like, "Oh, please don't be about that." Fuck, it is about that, isn't it? God damn it.
Yeah.
Like you could see her like have that realization of like, "Oh fuck, this is what this is about." Same time I had it, she's like, "Oh god damn it."
Yeah.
Ugh.
But it's great. Talk to your friends about books.
Yeah.
It's so enjoyable. Should we do bookends?
Yeah, let's do bookends.
All right.
Let's get into it.
So bookends, this is where we ask the questions that we think y'all should be asking yourselves as you read this. So who should read the Dangerous Wolves stories? All the Little Red stories.
I'm
sticking with my answer. I'm reading it to my kids. I mean,
clearly not explaining
the motif in general.
And you know what? That's one point I want to bring up. This is written coded for parents to understand what the topic is.
Right.
In a way, and it's written in a way that you can explain these dangers to children without being too graphic about what those dangers are.
Right, which we talked about a little bit in Fruitful Sleep as well.
Their cautionary tales are basically allegories themselves.
Right.
You know, it's a story about a situation.
So yeah, my answer is, I mean, I think little kids should read this, Stranger Danger. I think it's a great way to capture their attention to start the stranger danger conversation.
Yes, that's great. I mean, honestly, like I believe that all of the originals should be read to the kids before they learn the newer ones.
Yeah.
I would recommend it to parents that have difficulty starting that discussion.
Yeah. Okay. So book club. What questions do we think people should take to their book club if they're going to read the Little Red Riding Hood stories?
Do you think that the authors writing these stories actually have the underpinned meaning of these stories in mind while they're writing them?
That's a good question.
From one to the next, because Perrault often follows the path of Basile. Grimm's follow the path of Perrault and Basile. New modern writers follow the Grimm's, Perrault, and Basile. But if you look at Basile versus Perrault, Perrault's like, ooh, that's a little vulgar. Now we know why, because he's super fucking Christian. But he's like, ooh, that's a little vulgar. Let's soften that down into this situation.
Which you see in modern retellings. Think of a movie from the 1980s or a TV show from the 1990s that you're like, if they were to redo it, they'd be like, we can't really say that right now.
Oh, yeah.
We've had conversations about movies from the 70s.
Making it more and more politically correct.
So is that what they were doing? I mean, I don't know if that's the answer to your question, but is Perrault going, God damn, Basile, I can't say that.
Well, he wouldn't say goddamn because he's not taking the Lord's name in vain.
So are they taking the structure of the story and adding their own flair? Are they adding what they
This is why I said bring up this question, because like,
yeah, there's a lot of ways.
It could even be like, how can we still get this story across while taking out some elements that don't feel necessary or feel too vulgar to be giving to children?
Right.
That's something to think about. Like,
I like it.
Do you think that they do see the underpinned moral of the story, the actual situation of the story, and they're just softening the language while still trying to get the point across because of current social acceptable, like what's current social, like political correctness?
Right.
Yeah. So that's my question. What's yours?
I wrote this down last night before we had this conversation.
Lame.
Obviously. Well, I'm curious how you're going to answer it now that we've had this conversation. Could you gender swap this?
Yeah.
How would that work? Do you think it would work? Why not? Was my question.
Well, I don't know. There might actually be a series of stories that does this, because young men are given this invincibility complex through these stories that are being told.
Yeah, tell me a little boy isn't as much of a risk of the little,
I think
as
it
Little
comes
Red
more
is.
to like swindled swindlers and wishful fools and things like those sorts, those kind of motifs. I think would speak more towards boys in these kinds of situations.
Right.
I think more modern day interpretations are going to remove gender away from it, and then
because the message is just as important for little boys as little girls.
We have a more modern day writer that kind of plays this with this concept. Roald Dahl.
Yeah.
Roald Dahl always, he's been banned in so many schools and so many districts because conservatives it's always, this isn't a political stab. Conservatives are the ones that had his books banned because they read it as he was encouraging children not to respect the authority of their parents, when in reality, he was teaching kids what abuse of authority towards children is and where to go to find help.
Correct. Yes, absolutely. That's a great connection to make. And I think if somebody was to redo it, I hope he does it.
Right.
All right, casting call. Who would you have for each of the stories to play Little Red? Obviously.
Little Red.
But optional, the wolf. Because I had pairings depending on how the story went.
Okay, so the wolf, I really want it done in like the style of Cats. The makeup, like it's gonna be a movie.
For
like,
sure.
Makeup done so that they kind of look like a wolf, but a human at the same time.
Absolutely. So
Willem Dafoe.
All of them?
No, Willem Dafoe would be a great wolf.
He would be a great wolf.
He knows how to play evil, maniacal, like so well.
Okay, so Perrault's version that ends in 8 Grandma, 8 Little Red Riding Hood, the end.
Let's start with the wolves first.
Okay, the wolves first. I had Javier Bardem for that one.
Oh, he would be good, like how he was in Mother.
The one that, because that's the wolf that just like, he doesn't even stumble. I mean, his plan works to perfection. That was a smooth story for the wolf. So I chose Javier Bardem for that one. And that Little Red didn't do a whole lot. So for Perrault's, I had Joey King.
Okay, yeah, I see that.
Okay.
Billy Bob Thornton for Perrault's wolf.
Billy Bob Thornton, that's a good one.
That for Perrault's.
Yeah, that's a good one.
For Little Red, I could see Elle Fanning for that.
Yeah.
I really could see Elle Fanning for that one.
Yep. Okay, so the Grimms, the wolf and Little Red, to remind you, ends in them cutting open the wolf and Grandma climbing out and the rocks in the tummy and that ending, that version. Who's Little Red climbing out with the what the fuck, and who's the wolf?
So the wolf will be Willem Dafoe. The Little Red would be Bailey Madison.
Okay.
You know who that is?
Yeah.
Yeah, she's grown up quite a bit. But we're playing past and present with the characters. So Bailey Madison when she was like 12.
I had Taylor Swift as like the looks sort of innocent, but like, what the hell is that all about? Like, I just had this like
here's my thing.
Yeah.
Here's my thing. She could have collected all the flowers in the world. With those legs, she would have been there in 2 steps in the shake of a lamb's tail. There's no way that wolf would have beat her.
Short Taylor Swift, please.
She came out 6 foot.
So then I'm like, well, who would play a wolf that would like complement Taylor Swift? I just thought Jake Gyllenhaal.
Because he smells?
Because they have a past.
Oh, yeah, and he smells.
Sure. All right, how about McPhail's? McPhail's is the one where Red fights back a little bit. She runs, she hides, she screams.
Skeet Ulrich.
Ooh, that's a good wolf.
Yeah, sure.
Especially that like crawling under the bed to try to reach her and then getting stuck.
Well, also, like, I've always hated Skeet Ulrich because of that one line in Scream where he goes, Sheriff, I didn't kill anybody. When he says body, I fucking, ever since that day, I'm like, I hope you are the killer and I hope you get yours.
I went a totally different direction. I had a little bit more of a comical version of him chasing her around the room and getting stuck under the bed.
Who'd you got?
Chris Pratt.
Okay, so like Parks and Rec, Chris Pratt?
Yeah.
Okay.
The big dumb oaf that just like, this plan went off.
He's just a dumb oaf.
Went off the rails for him.
Off the rails.
Super fast. And then I had Willow Smith for his Red Riding Hood.
Oh, yes. She would be so good.
Yeah.
She would be so good. Who would I have for McPhail? Young. Yeah. When I say young, I mean young Natalie Portman.
Oh, like the professional.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's exact, the Bob. That's the exact Natalie Portman I was thinking of. Not Natalie Portman, SNL throwing a baby off the roof.
That's a perfect answer for all 3 of them, just because of the range that she had in that role.
Yeah.
Oh, good answer.
Okay.
Good answer.
Whew. All right, guys, that's it for today's episode. Thanks for joining us on Cracking Spines podcast. Next week, Candice and I will be discussing the fate of spinning motif, or as you all know it, rumple foreskin, stiltskin. And
that's going to be fun.
Yeah. We're not cutting out those jokes. Oh, get it? Cutting out.
And we're out. And one day it may happen that you and I completely disagree, which will be a ton of fun.
Yeah, because I will be the one that's right.
How did I not see that coming?
I mean, because we know I'm always right. It's like common knowledge. God, you know how hard it is to be this humble? It's fucking, God, it's a stretch.
You do it so well.
I have to stretch before I do this.
I bet.
Yeah, I don't want to pull a muscle. A creative muscle, an intelligent muscle.
You done?
My hamstring.